Their descent on Aleppo has been blistering in its speed, taking the Syrian regime and the world by surprise. Opposition fighters now control much of the city, and they're vowing to take the capital, Damascus, next.
And guys, Russian state media is now reporting that Russian jets are fighting back, launching air raids in parts of Aleppo overnight. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 287 people have been killed since the rebels' surprise offensive began. Gio?
All right, a very dangerous situation there in Aleppo.
Fighting in Syria's northwest is a sharp escalation in a war that had all but slipped off the international radar. Is another major conflict about to flare back up in the Middle East?
It's the biggest flare-up in years in a civil war that has seen involvement by Russia, Iran, the U.S., Turkey, and Israel.
And mostly the unknown aspect of Mr. Trump's unpredictability is causing the Ayatollah in Tehran to really be cautious. Now, my concern is that China and Russia are going to have a role here. Of course, they're aligned with Iran. They're helping the Houthis to make the Red Sea more dangerous. And of course, they're helping Assad in Damascus. So they're not going to abandon Hezbollah for now, but they're going to resupply, and eventually we'll get back in a few years to much the same threat that was posed, 14 months ago by Hezbollah.
To Syria now, where the army has withdrawn from the country's second largest city, Aleppo, in the face of a surprise rebel advance. The army says it's regrouping ahead of the arrival of reinforcements. Meanwhile, Russia, Syria's key ally, has promised to step up military aid and air support. Sky's Tom Cheshire from Beirut has more.
This is really significant.
To see the entire city fall in 24 hours, as we did yesterday, is, beyond dramatic. It's like an earthquake in the scale of the last 13, 14 years of the Syrian crisis.
That mention of Turkey is really, really important here because there is this wider regional conflict at play. Turkey and Russia were the signatories to that 2020 ceasefire. Turkey backing the rebels, Russia backing President Assad's regime. That did help, but it looks like Turkey perhaps has given the green light to this. That's what sources have told Reuters news agency in an effort to tip the balance in this region to exert more influence. And it also shows, I think, the second order effects of war. Russia has been fighting in Ukraine, a long and grinding war, and as difficult it is for Ukraine, it is also difficult for Russia, which has committed manpower and also weaponry to Ukraine from Syria. But I think that really speaks to how a war in one place can have these cascading effects across the region, potentially redrawing the map of control and influence.
We in the Military Operations Department stand up to our responsibilities to put an end to the transgressions of this criminal regime and protect our people.
The attack shows the weakness of President Assad's regime as its allies fight in other wars, with Russia bogged down in Ukraine and Iran and its proxies weakened in the conflict with Israel. Syria's dictator has been left exposed.
The army says it has withdrawn its troops to prepare for a counter-offensive. The surprise advance by rebel fighters has been led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They are based in the Idlib province, the last stronghold of militia forces in Syria. The group says they have control of the entire area, sweeping west and reaching Aleppo in 3 days. It's the first time the city has been under rebel control since the president's allies, Russia and Iran, forced them out 8 years ago.
We begin this hour with breaking news. Volodymyr Zelensky has suggested that he's prepared to give up some parts of Ukraine to Russia for the time being, so long as there is a ceasefire and his country is given NATO membership.
So as the ceasefire deal appears to be cracking at least a little bit, where is this all heading next? Author of the new book, Preparing for World War III, a global conflict that redefines tomorrow. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Bob Maginnis joins us now. It's great to have you on the program this morning, and I want to get your take on this. The ceasefire appears to be intact, at least for now, but ultimately the sparring isn't a great sign that it could see 60 days, is it?
Yeah, Jackie, we've seen this for decades and decades. Certainly the 2006 fight was ended with UN Resolution 1701. It's almost identical to what we're seeing today. 60 days, a cool-off period.
I mean, they're fighting on multiple fronts here, but I'm wondering what you think this says about Iran, being that Hezbollah, Hamas, they're Iranian proxies, and an incoming Trump administration who has said it will be very tough on Iran. It will go back to a maximum pressure campaign. The fact that Hezbollah would even agree to said ceasefire, to me, indicates that Iranians are also saying, you know what, we should back off a little too.
Well, it's a calculation. They're concerned that JCPOA, of course, is dead under Trump, and they're going to get more sanctions. And then, of course, the U.S. is going to up its ante, perhaps militarily, in the region, which is going to stop more of those so-called ballistic missiles and drones that Iran would like to toss at Israel. So all of these factors, and mostly the unknown aspect of Mr. Trump's unpredictability, is causing the Ayatollah in Tehran to really be cautious.
This is the last thing we need. Another war zone in the Middle East after what we have seen in Gaza and Lebanon and elsewhere in the region.
That we can't really foresee what will happen, but this definitely is a major development.
This is obviously not happening in a black box. There are regional dynamics in play. How do you think the global powers, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the United States, are likely to respond?
And even took control of the headquarters for the city's police force. And hours earlier, they took control of a highway that links Aleppo to the capital Damascus, that's been used by government forces to transport weapons.
And they've pretty much, we understand, taken over all of the city. The map is changing dramatically. Now, of course, this asks questions. What does this mean for President Assad? It's my understanding that he has been to Moscow to try and appeal for more help from the Kremlin. I think in Moscow, Vladimir Putin is, he's very worried about the situation that is unfolding in Syria. Remember, it's not that long ago that he had to send in his air force to basically keep President Assad in power, so he wasn't toppled by the opposition back during the revolution. Now, they are pledging a counteroffensive, and we are seeing the first glimmer of that tonight. Very heavy airstrikes, we understand, in and around Aleppo. And I think, again, that will suggest that there is going to be a big fight when, of course, President Assad can muster the forces to launch a counter-strike.
And opposition forces say the fight is only beginning.
Since the very beginning, we have been making this call. Israel is spoiled and is carrying out state terror in an outlawed way, and the only thing that can stop it is the alliance of Islamic countries.
Israel's stalling and deception should not be given any more credit. In the absence of the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution number 2735, coercive measures against Israel should be put on the agenda. Israel's behavior has once again demonstrated that it is imperative for the international community to develop a protection mechanism for Palestinian civilians. 70 years ago, just as Hitler was stopped by an alliance of humanity, Netanyahu and his murder network must be stopped by an alliance of humanity. We believe that the General Assembly's authority to recommend the use of force, as in the 1950 Resolution on Unity for Peace, should be considered in this process.
Turkey's Erdogan is not our friend. He's one of the most dangerous dictators in the world, and the United States government and media have no business helping this Islamist megalomaniac and his al-Qaeda partners. Turkey's been supporting ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists from behind the scenes for years.